because I know you're a guy that's going to appreciate this. I just locked myself out of my own damn podcast studio. I ha- I don't know how the hell I did it. It's one of those locks, man, that you actually have to turn, you know? So
Yeah.
I run in there real quick to grab something to drink, man. Coming back out here and I hit the door and I'm like, oh, you have got to be kidding me.
That
Yeah.
sucks, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So how you been, dude?
Good, good. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I got a crazy schedule. We just bought 22 acres, about an hour, well, about an hour from where school is. So it was a lot cheaper to come out here and everything. Yeah, man. So I've just been busy with that. And of course, we just had the big snow and all that. But I also have a background in general construction. My dad was a master carpenter. He was actually went to school. He was a master electrician, master plumber. Um, but he was big in drywall in the early 70s. He was one of the biggest drywall contractors in this area back in the 70s. So
Really?
I got a lot of that from, I grew up, 8 years old, as far back I can remember, I was about 8 years old and carrying tools and
Yeah.
stuff like that for dad, man. So yeah, that's how I started. So I grew up framing. I mean, we did his motto back in the day was, we do anything from the ground up.
There
And
you go.
that's no kidding, man. We did. I mean, we did anything from the ground up, and he could do it, and he was one of the best. So
That's
I
awesome.
grew. That's what I grew up with, and then I found welding, and that just kind of compounded all of that. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's awesome. So you've had roots in that area most all your life then.
yeah.
Okay.
I've traveled all over. I've lived overseas. I've lived in several different states here, but
Sweet.
yeah, it's all. I don't know about you, but yeah, for me, it's true. You always end up coming back home, no
Oh
matter
yeah, man.
what. So, yeah, yeah.
All right, we'll get into that. Is there anything you want to that you don't want to talk about, John?
No, no,
Okay.
I'm pretty open, man. Yeah,
Yeah, I always like to ask that question just to make
yeah,
sure that there's nothing that guests don't want to talk about.
sure. No, man, I'm good. I'm an open book.
Sweet. We'll just go ahead and get started then. So my
Sure,
guest today is Mr. John Jenkins. He goes by Mr. J Welds, right? Mr. J
Mr. J
Welds on
Wells
social media.
on
All
social
right,
media.
man.
Yeah, yep.
Mr. J Welds. He's a high school welding instructor from Shelby County, Kentucky. I got that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Welcome to the show. Really, man, dude, I've been looking forward to having you on here. The first thing that I noticed when I watched your videos is your energy, your passion.
Thank you.
And when I saw that, look, you know as well as I do, not every teacher has that. Not everybody brings that component to education. And when you see
Right.
that, it's refreshing, it's respectable, and it needs to be highlighted. So, man, at that point, I knew I had to have you on my show, Mr. J. And man, I'm very excited to have you here, buddy.
Well, I appreciate it. It's been a long time coming. We talked about this a while back. Like I was saying before we got started, we just bought a farm and staying busy with that. So that's taking up a whole lot of time. I was actually telling my
Yeah.
principal the other day, it had been almost 3 months and I actually had a day off between working here at the house and or working at school or both. So I've been crazy busy, but yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a while. As a matter of fact, like you and I talked about last night, throw some buddies out there. Bob Steele from Hobart,
Yeah.
mutual friend. He said, "Man, you
Love
guys will
Bob.
get along great." Mark, who's now your new partner in crime, apparently.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, he said the same thing. He said, "Man, you guys have hit it off great." So I've been looking forward to this for a while because I wanted to actually come up and meet you, uh, just at some point.
Yeah.
But then now you're doing this, so this is a great way to meet. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm still looking forward to that in-person meeting, man.
Oh,
For
well,
sure. We'll make it happen this summer.
I'll be in Hobart sometime either June or July. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm going for my CWI, so I'll be up
Oh,
there for
holler
that.
at me while you're in town, brother. We'll
Absolutely,
get
man.
together for sure. For sure.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So tell me about the early days, John.
Whew.
So you had mentioned before, and you know what, you had mentioned that prior to us starting this conversation. Let's start there. Let's start
Sure.
with the background in your family, the men in your family that you grew to respect. Let's start there. Let's hear your story as young Mr. J.
Sure. Well, so young Mr. J, like I was saying before, as far back as I can remember, like I said, about 8 years old or somewhere thereabouts, working with dad. Of course, I always remember dad working on the house. So if anybody grew up with dad, who was the contractor, framer, roofer, drywall guy, whatever, your house was always being worked on at some point. So grew up, of course, with that.
Yeah.
And then that parlayed into me being old enough to get in the truck and then learn what I was a tool getter. I was a tool gopher, and that's how that started my education. So I think that probably also started early on my interest in tools. Love tools. I have new tools, modern tools. I have some antique tools, but I've always loved tools, and it probably came from that. But getting tools for dad, that's when I first started learning, what a drill was and what it did, and what a difference between a regular drill and a hammer drill, for example. The difference in
Hmm.
those two, and how to put the different bits and tools and everything in them. And so I started that, and then just did that for years until I learned every tool in the truck. I could run every tool in the truck. I could maybe, I could change blades. I won't say service, but change blades and stuff like that on all the tools, drill bits, everything. And then the old man finally said, "Yeah, it's let's get you out here." So then I started getting a little more involved, demolition, that sort of thing. And
How
then,
old were you then?
oh gosh, 10 or 12.
Okay.
Yeah, just a couple years of being a tool gopher. Of course, I was still the tool gopher. I was just a tool
Sure.
gopher with a little bit more responsibility. So
Absolutely right. You got a
running,
little bit of a raise, huh?
right, right. So I
Yeah.
think he started out paying me 25 cents an hour. I think that's what he told me, something like that when I first started. So I was still getting paid, but it ended up being more of an allowance than anything. But yeah, so I was 10 or 12, and then he started bringing me in, inside to watch a lot more. Of course, I watched getting tools, so I got to see a whole lot of stuff anyway. And then I became more curious about it. So I'm asking questions, and then he just started teaching me more and more and more and more. And I enjoyed going to work with dad. I used to remember him picking me up after school, or mom picking me up and dropping me off at a job site. And I'd work the evening with dad. We'd come home, do homework, and go to eat and go to bed, and get up the next day and do it all over again. So, I mean, that was my childhood, amongst a lot of other great things. But that was the core of my childhood.
Dude, those are priceless memories.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No better way to learn right there. I mean, was your dad pretty patient with you? Was he one of those dads? Did he teach you a lot?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Dad was a great teacher, and sometimes, and let me say this, shout out to mom. She's a great teacher, was and still is a great teacher. But yeah, dad was a great teacher. He had just kind of a great knack, especially in trades, because he knew the trade so well.
Hmm.
Regardless, dad was actually, he went to school. He was a master plumber, master electrician, and then amongst, again, all the other things, he was a master carpenter, framer. He was one of the biggest drywall contractors in this area back in the 70s. So he had a huge reputation for drywall. So another side note, we went to buy some racks from a guy off of Facebook one time. It ended up being an old friend of his. So when I went and rang the doorbell, he said, "Are you the John Jenkins, the drywall guy?" And I said, "Well, I'm John Jenkins, the young drywall guy. The old drywall guy you're looking for is in the car." So that's, the old, I always say that the greatest era of contractors, 70s, 80s, 90s, man, those guys
Yep.
were awesome, awesome.
They were.
But
I mean, that's back when men built their business off of a handshake and the reputation, their follow through, doing what they say they were going to do and doing it right with craftsmanship, integrity, and the customer satisfaction in mind.
yes,
That was the core values of every contractor during that era. And at some point,
absolutely.
we've lost our way, or we've drifted away. Not every contractor has, but a lot have,
Right.
and we don't see that same types of craftsmanship. And a lot of that is consumers' fault too, as well. I mean, when you buy everything at Walmart, you can't expect craftsmanship all the time.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And the days when I did it, and I know the days that dad did it, one of the things was, we're going to get all the material. We'll handle that part of it.
Yep.
Because once again, you never knew what people were going to buy or want us to use, or so. Yeah, we never did that.
Absolutely. Very cool. So you're a teenager at this point. When did you start looking into welding as being a career option?
Well, welding actually didn't come along until a little bit later. As a teenager, I was, again, grew up in construction, so for me that was my kind of like my job. I always worked for dad in the summers. Worked for him again while I was in school, so that was my job. So I didn't have to go anywhere necessarily to get a job. Well, working for dad as a teenager, I actually, high school, I did some other things. I was actually in art. I was heavily involved in art. In high school, I got interested in sculpture and that sort of thing. So I think that might have sort of piqued my interest in metal
Yeah.
field. And then I didn't actually pursue that. I actually ended up pursuing a career as in professional ice hockey. I played some short spans in the minor leagues. And then
What?
after getting, yes, sir, yeah,
What,
I
dude? A
I played,
big
yeah.
burly bearded guy from Kentucky
Hmm.
in the professional ice hockey.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir.
All right, man, let's stop. Let's stop there and let's go down that road real quick. Seriously.
Okay. Sure. Okay.
Where did that come from?
Man, so my brother somehow got interested in it through a friend of his, and we had in Louisville. I grew up in Louisville, and
Okay.
we had a minor league team. It was a ECHL, East Coast Hockey League team. It was the Louisville Ice Hawks. Yeah, it was Ice Hawks, and I never will forget. I could still remember good pieces of that game, that first game that I ever went to, and that was one of the coolest things I had ever seen in my life. And at that time, I was probably about 10 years old, and just fell in love with it. And there was a very small community of that in Louisville. And so I just got involved with that. And then even stranger, I'm involved in this community of travel hockey house, house hockey, house leagues, So I played house leagues. I did a little bit of travel. And then as I got a little older, I actually ended up working as a like a usher for the hockey team and the minor league baseball team. We had two teams here, so I ended up working for these guys. Here's another road for you.
What?
Ended up mascotting for both of them. So I had a short career as a professional mascot too, about 2-3 years, I guess it was. And so that gave me access to the team. I had access to the arena, the ice, and then my dad actually
Wow.
was an excellent pitcher. He could have gone pro as a pitcher, baseball pitcher, and so he was actually teaching me to pitch because I had access to the bullpens and all the good stuff under the stadium. So I was kind of double up. I was playing hockey and I was learning how to pitch from my old man. I originally was going to, here's another road. I was originally going to Miami of Ohio. I was going to try to walk on there for the hockey team, and then I was going to try to walk on for the club baseball team. So I
There you
ended up
go.
not doing that. I pursued a career in the minor leagues. That was very short lived. Went to a couple teams, and again, that was a short lived career, and that was okay. I came back here, and here's what got me more into metal. So I get involved with once again, I bump into these guys, friends of friends, and I go to work selling jewelry with these guys. They have these jewelry stores. And so they teach me the hustle in the game and how to sell and how to, it's all legit stuff. It's all real deal
Yeah.
stuff. But they're teaching me how to talk and how to sell and how all this. But then they realized that I was pretty handy. I was a construction my whole life, and my dad had actually done some things for their store, some modifications and stuff for the store. So I'm working with these guys. Well, then they say, well, here you try working with this gold and with this silver. So they start teaching me, how to basically work gold and silver. So I ended up apprenticing with them as a goldsmith, silversmith. I was making rings. I was doing all kinds of stuff. Then I brought us into the next level of technology. We ended up buying a benchtop CNC machine that was actually in a CNC engraving machine that I retooled as a CNC. And then we started actually milling all kinds of custom pieces and parts and all kinds of stuff in gold and silver, in addition to doing like traditional, like jewelry making and that sort of thing. So that
Right.
got me interested in metal. Parents end up going through a divorce, and then
Okay.
mom gets remarried. Stepdad, loving to death, fantastic guy. I try to spend as much time with him now as I can. But he's a retired pipe fitter, so he was pipe fitting back in the day. So again, we're talking, and I start getting interested in metal, and then I start getting interested in welding and you're gonna laugh at me, but those early 2000s Discovery, Monster Garage, Monster House,
Are you
American
kidding
Chopper
me?
Build Off, all of those, loved that stuff, man. Got me interested in welding, and
Hold on just a second. Hold on just a second, John. Rob Weber with Trade Fuel Coffee just had him on the other day, and that was his inspiration, man. The
oh,
exact same
really?
thing. Dude, I'm not even kidding you. I'm not even joking. Rob, if you're
That's
listening to this,
awesome.
man, you got another Monster Garage enthusiast that got his start watching this stuff. Carry on,
Yeah,
dude. This is awesome.
yeah. So stepdad's a pipe fitter, and at that time I had stopped. I had came back home from playing hockey. I'd gotten beat up on the last team or whatever, and it was enough for me. Coach, he said, man, I like you, kid, but you need to he said, you should be a coach. You'd be a great coach. So I'm like, yeah, okay. Come back home, still back in construction with the old man. And then, like I said, I bump into these guys. I get into this jewelry thing. And so stepdad's a pipe fitters. He says, once again, you're a pretty handy guy. He goes, maybe you should be, thinking about pipe fitting or think about welding. And I said, one time my grandfather told me, I never will forget. I was probably about 16 years old. We were going to dinner one night, and he looked at me, he said, John, he said, you should be a welder. They make a lot of money. And I looked at him, I said, Papaw, I don't know anything about welding. And I didn't. I never really thought about it again. But anyway, so flashback to that. So stepdad says, you're pretty handy. He said, you'd probably be a good welder. You'd be, he's a good pipe fitter. And I thought, okay, I could get into that. So I'm seeing these shows, and I'm like, these guys are welding. These guys are making stuff. I'm like, I'm just as handy as these guys. I just don't know how to weld. So I said, I'm going to learn how to weld. So I ended up enrolling at the state system. It's a KCTCS, the Kentucky was a community technical college system, which that's what it is now. Back then, it was just JCTC, which is the one in the location in Louisville. So I enroll at JCTC. I go in. I have an awesome instructor, a guy named Todd Hatfield. He's still there. There was rumor mill. Sorry, Todd, if it's just a rumor, but someone said you were talking about retiring. I don't know, but if you're out there, we need to hook up. Anyway, Todd Hatfield, great guy, introduced me. Like I said, he was my first instructor. Pretty much taught me all the basics of welding.
How old were you at this time?
I was oh man, I'm old now, so maybe, oh gosh, what was I, 23?
Okay.
23, somewhere, 23, 24 maybe.
Okay.
20,
okay.
No, I was 23, yeah, 23. So again, started with oxy-fuel welding, and gas welding, and so I'm kicking around the idea of teaching that, bringing that back. I know there's a lot of programs that don't, but I think about it now, and I feel like it was pretty beneficial to me in understanding a lot of the basics, but. So that was my sort of first introduction. Of course, it was stick after that, and then MIG, then TIG, and then of course he taught me blueprint reading. And I was familiar with blueprints and schematics and things, but metal looks a little bit different. Structural parts typically look different than a framed. What a framed home would look like on a print. Taught me again a lot of those basics. So I'm there, and apparently, I'd say he took a liking to me. He pulled me in the office one day. He said, "Hey man, you want to get a job welding?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm here for, man. I want to be a welder." And he says, "Well," he said, I used to be one of the instructors over at Jeff Boat. We used to have a barge building company in southern Indiana, right on the Ohio, right there between Louisville and southern Indiana."
Yeah, I believe you go by that place on the dinner cruise there in Louisville.
Yes, yep, you sure do. You go
I
right
went
by
right
it,
by there, man. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Now they're closed. They've been closed for a few years. I don't recall how long, but they've been closed for a while. So anyway, he says, I was one of the instructors in their school over there. And he said, I think you're a great welder, man. You do a good job. You're always here. You're on time, and you're showing up. You're putting in the work. You're interested. You're excited. I was bringing in, little projects to work on. Man, as a matter of fact, all the work we've been doing here at this house, I moved a bunch of walls and re-drywalled stuff, and I'm using the same aluminum horse that the old man used to use when he hung drywall with it. And I was laughing because I was moving it the other day out of the house, and there's aluminum welds from a spool gun that I used in welding school to fix that. So I was bringing in little projects like that, repairs and stuff, all kinds of. I started hustling little things on the side, little fabrication projects. I take them in there, and Todd say, "Yeah, man, here, just do your thing." And so, he like I said, I was always doing stuff like that. So he knew that's what I wanted to do. He knew I was really hungry to learn. So he put in the word for me over there at Jet Boat. I went and took the fill out application and went through the process and got hired in. And so when I got in there, my goal, I said, man, I want to walk out of here with every certification they offer. That was my goal there. And I accomplished that, except for I wasn't never certified on sub-arc. And there were a couple of pipe tests that I didn't certify on, but I pretty much walked out of there with, there wasn't anything in that yard that I couldn't weld when I left. And that was I was only there for just under 3 years, I think.
That's
so
awesome.
that was my goal. So I walked in school, and I'd already been to welding school for a couple of years, and about a year and a half at that point, I guess. And so I had pretty good experience under my belt. So I walked in, and the only thing that was new to me really at that point was arc gouging. And our new mutual friend, I was actually listening to your interview with Mike.
Yeah.
On the way home today, and he was talking about gouging. And I tell you what, I'm the same way. I love gouging. I absolutely love gouging. Yes, I love
Dude,
gouging.
I'm going to tell you the same thing. If you heard it in there, no, man, I hate it. I hate it. It was a punishment for me. I can't stand it. But man, that is awesome though, because
I,
Mike's look, Mike, you're listening. I know you're gonna be. Man, he wizard with this thing, and he loves it. So if you're in the same boat, brother, I don't know. You guys need to share that secret with me.
yeah,
Maybe we're all gonna have to get together, and you guys need to teach me the right way to do this because maybe I don't understand it, or maybe I'm just jaded from my experience in the past.
well, so the crazy part, he was talking about, I think he was talking about getting in tanks and back gouging. He
Uh-huh.
mentioned working in places doing that, and so that's actually how we set up our grooves for our test. So basically, it was a U groove. It was a gaff. So what we did was we would just take two plates and slam a whole like huge baskets of test plates. You grab a couple, slam them together, pack them on the ends, and then just gouge right down the middle, and you'd leave a little. We left a little land in there, and then we would ran every test was ran that way. So we had runoff tabs, the top and the bottom. We gouged our groove all the way through, and then I remember the first test I took was a oh gosh, what was it? Oh man, it was a 70-20. It was a 70-24.
Yeah.
So we gouged and we laid down that 70-24 jet rod, and then we back gouged and we laid that down again. So that got you a flat welder certification. If I remember, they skipped my tacker certification because I'd already been to school, so they gave me credit for that. So I could have went out in the yard as a tacker, but I just told them I wanted to stay in school and knock out these certs. That was the first one, was 70-24, and then we went to was it a 70? We were running like 530. I want to say we were running. So we ran another gouge with like a seven with a like a 532 70-24. We'd do multi pass.
Okay.
That was one. And then we jumped into 60-10, and that's where I really learned to run 60-10 was in the shipyard.
I'll bet.
But yeah, same thing, gouge and then root with the 60-10, hot fill cap. And the only thing they would take was a box weave. So you had to learn that box weave with a 60-10, and I could daggone near make that look like a 70-18. No, I'm just
That's
telling
awesome,
you.
man.
But no, I got pretty good with it. That's why I love my kids. My kids hate 60-10, and they can't understand why I love it so much.
Right.
And I was like, I just ran it so much, but and then it of course went on to like in our 305 running flat. We call that flat wire because you can only run it flat or just a fillet. So we got certified on that, and then in our 232, the all positions with all that, and then 60-10 all position, and then it got into, gosh, I don't remember. We used to call it Alien 9. It was just a dual shield like flux core. That was one, and then, gosh, got into pipe, so I did a bunch of pipe certs and stuff like that. So
In
that's actually where
total,
I really learned to weld pipe, was in that yard too. So
that's awesome. So you got, I mean, I'm counting every bit of 8 to 10 certs.
it's something like that. Actually, I found one of my old cards. I think it has like 4 or 5 on there.
Wow.
I can't find it now, but of course I found it when we were moving. Now I can't find it, but yeah, yeah, I think I walked out there with 8 or 10. I walked out with quite a few.
That's
So
incredible.
yeah, it was great. It was a good experience, man. And I was working. I tell my kids, if you're a welder and you're working 40 hours, you're working part-time.
Yep.
So I remember working in the yard, we were doing, 60, 70, sometimes 80-hour weeks. And I tell you, you were always talking about reputation and connection and networking. That was a union yard, but I never forget, I was kind of low in the totem pole. I was, like I said, I was on there for a couple years, but I would get, even in my early, like right when I got out of the school there. I think I got out of school. It took me about 6 weeks, something like that. And I knocked out. Ended up becoming a first class welder. I got all the way to that point, and I said I'll hop out. And then a lot of the more advanced stuff, I would just go back to the school and take, just to have it. And
Yeah.
then sometimes they'd call me to do it. But anyway, so I got out in the yard. So I'd probably been out in the yard maybe 3 months, and then I was starting to get calls on Friday night saying, "Hey man, we know you're the low man on the totem pole, but just come in tomorrow. We won't say anything to anybody. We won't tell the steward and all this stuff." And I'm like, "Hey man, as long as I don't get in trouble, I'm just helping you guys out. That's how I see it, right?" And
Yep.
so I was getting phone calls like that. So good reputation and good work ethic, that goes a long way. I was getting phone calls, "Hey, we've got something down the river that we can't, like, we had a repair area, then we had what we called river completion. So once you drop one of them in the river, they push it back to river completion, and they would check it for leaks and stuff like that. So I got good at doing repairs, like those types of repairs, like in the water, like water's actively coming in and I'm making this repair.
Oh, wow.
I got pretty good with stuff like that. So I'd get a phone call. Hey man, can you come in the morning? We know you're the low man, but can you come in and fix this? Cause we're having trouble with it. And I would do stuff like that. So that was pretty cool. And then I ended up they started building ocean going, chemical carrying barges. They were hot oil and jet fuel barges from what we were told. But these things were huge. They were like 4 stories tall. They
Wow.
were maybe 80 feet or so wide. Maybe, yeah, probably 80 feet wide. And I think the longest one was almost 400 feet long. So these things were pretty big.
Jeez.
So I ended up working with one of the best guys I've probably ever worked with and ever will work with. A guy named Butch Wheatley. Butch or any of his family, you guys see this, let's get in contact somehow or another. But this guy taught me, he was my first like old timer teacher in that field, besides Todd, and there was the couple of fellows in this weld school there, but Butch had been around for a long, long time, and he's the guy that taught me how to run a 7018. The first guy
Okay.
that really taught me how to run a 78 like really well. But yeah, so we ended up being put on kind of like we were kind of like a pickup hitters. We were the cleanup guys, so we would come behind everybody and then we would check their work, look for different things that they missed to make repairs and stuff that they might have missed or couldn't, whatever issue they were having. But then we also did testing, so we would hydro test and then we would air test the different tanks and different wing tanks and keel sections and things in these barges to make sure that they were airtight. So and then on top, so we were working pretty closely with like American Bureau of Shipping. Of course, we were working with our own QC guys, so they were the first to come through. So they come through QC and check, tell us what needs to be fixed. We'd fix it. Then we would bring in Coast Guard. Coast Guard would come through and they'd say, okay, this is good, this isn't good, or whatever, this has to be fixed or changed or whatever. So then we would fix that. Once we got all that done, then we would contact our ABS or American Bureau of Shipping rep, and he would come down. He was our inspector. He would come down, walk through, and then he was the final yes or no. So we had to typically run like live air and hydro test in front of him so he could watch to make sure everything was legit. So we had to make sure this stuff was tight before he came on site, because if he came and we popped one of those tests, there was hell to pay for that.
You're shutting
Not
down for a
not
while, aren't you?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
not just from our, not from just from our bosses because we failed the test, but from him because
Right,
if he
exactly.
failed the test, he wouldn't come back.
Oh, wow.
Well, he would. Let me say this: he would, but he would take his own sweet time on coming back. So he'd disappear and he'd say, "Oh, well, I'm downriver right now, or I'm upriver right now, or I'm somewhere," and yeah. So he would slow walk us, and he knew that hurt us. So
Yeah.
that's when we learned very quickly that you don't, and of course not that we were slacking that day, but whatever happened happened. So but yeah, we learned after that everything was had to be tight when he got there.
So you did all that testing prior to him getting there. You'd probably
Yeah.
you tested it 2 or 3
Oh
times
yeah.
before he even
Yeah.
got yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So, let me ask you this, did you have any DT certs like that for the
No,
hydro or anything
no,
like that?
no,
Okay.
nothing like no. They taught us how to do it there, and then like basically what we were doing is we would, if you know a little bit about shipbuilding or you understand ships, there's bulkheads and that basically split the ship up or the vessel up, I'll say, so that
Okay.
if say one is ruptured and it fills up with water, the other are still airtight, so it doesn't sink. So
Okay, that
we
makes
would
sense.
actually test. We would air test. So each bulkhead separates a side tank and a keel, a bottom. So there's two like side sections and a bottom that are basically hollow. For all intents and purposes, they're hollow. But we could make them airtight. We could close off the hatches, and we had ports that we would put in a hatch, and then we could pump air into those things, and then we could go into the backside and the other tanks and spray on the soapy water to see if any air leak through. And then we would just work our way back and forth that way a couple times, and everything got double checked. So once it got double
Okay.
checked, that's when we called him and said, hey, we're ready to go. So we did
Gotcha.
all that. And then when we do other cleanup, catch up stuff, so like there'd be failed x-rays. So they would call us. So we'd go in, we'd clean, they'd show us where it was, we'd mark it out, we'd gouge down, me, Mr. Gouger. So I think that's where I got it. I think that's where I get the love for gouging, because I was making repairs, and it's I'm trying to say this in a nice way. The old welder ego. Sometimes you get to hear a lot of that, especially in a yard and there's a bunch of guys welding, And there's guys that have been there for a long time. There's guys that have been there for a short time, but there's always a sort of an ego regardless. And I always really
Oh,
tried
absolutely.
not to be that guy, maybe a little bit early on, but I always try to be kind of like just the chill guy because I just learned it was just better to be quiet in a lot of situations, just keep your mouth shut. So it was sort of like, it was nice to go back and you could smile and show them where they had missed that X-ray, and then you gouge it out, and then you run 60-10 in there and cap it with 70-18 and pass the X-ray. And meanwhile, these guys are running automatics and they can't pass the X. That really, you talk about making some guys mad, that made a whole lot of guys really mad. So that kind of took pleasure, and here I am, I'm 24 and I'm doing stuff like this. And, there's guys in their 50s and 60s that are like, man, I can't even do that, so that was a good feeling. Again, the old timers, anytime you got props from an old timer, man, I mean, hell, even anytime you got anything from an old timer, even if it was grief, it was like you knew they did it out of love. They did it out of just, I don't know, respect, if you will.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
So you worked there how long?
It was a little under 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, a little
What?
under 3 years.
So you moved on from there. You had a
Yeah,
stack of certs. Where'd you go from
Stacksters.
there?
Well, I left there, and while I'm working there, make friends with another guy. If you're out there, I've talked to you a while, Brad Rouse, my brother from another mother way back in the day. There, we ended up we met out in the yard. We started working together in the yard, and then he'd been there for a while, and then he ended up becoming a supervisor. And I worked for him, or he was he was a crew foreman, and then he ended up becoming a area supervisor, and I worked under him both times. But meanwhile, he and I had started a business together. We were doing, man, this is crazy. Here's another J offshoot here. So we started building powder coating ovens and powder coating equipment. So once again, Monster Garage, American Chopper, all that, right? These guys are powder coating everything. So my buddy Brad, he says, "Hey man, I bought this little Eastwood powder coating setup for like $50." He goes, and then of course we're tinkering with, motorcycles and stuff, in our garages
Yeah.
while we're, at home, our little Lincoln MIG welders, our little 110, MIG welders and stuff. Again, we're figuring stuff out. We're still young welder. I was still young welder. We're doing this kind of stuff, at night. You get off work and go home, and this is the kind of stuff we were doing. Anyway, we start powder coating parts for ourselves. We were building motorcycles and making motorcycle parts and stuff like that, and parts for friends and buddies. So people were like, "Hey man, can you paint this or powder coat it?" Well, my buddy had done a lot of painting. At that point, I hadn't done any painting, but he's into this powder coating thing, so we give it a whirl. And so lo and behold, here we are. We're powder coating parts for all our good buddies at work and stuff, and we're making parts for them. So that kind of evolved, and we needed bigger equipment. So we said, hey, we can build this stuff. So we did some research and figured out basically how to build an oven. We're just, what's the genius behind that? So we figured out how to build a bigger oven. The first couple we built were kind of crude. It was using old oven parts, but I had a pretty good working knowledge of actually HVAC and that kind of stuff from growing up in construction.
Yeah.
So I'm figuring a lot of stuff out as well. And of course, again, my dad was a master electrician, so I know electrical fairly well. So
Yep.
we're figuring stuff out, and we start playing with, timers and relays and all this kind of stuff. So it just kind of evolved a little bit. So he and I ended up parting ways in the business. Just it didn't work with his family life and everything. He was married and kids, and I was single and nothing, ready to hang out there. I just kind of kept it going, and I continued to push and evolve and evolve and evolve. It went from really crude controller, oven type controllers off of a regular oven to actually I was building control boxes with relays and timers and digital thermostats and stuff like that. And
That's awesome.
I had a company that was manufacturing my own custom electrical elements. I knew I could put
Really?
so much in there. And yeah, I knew I could generate so much heat in these things. So
That is
I
so
did that.
cool. And let me tell you why. Let me stop you right there. Let me tell you why. Because if I built this podcast studio in the middle of my barn, right? It's like a 50 by 72 barn.
Nice,
And so
nice.
I built this podcast studio, but if I could take this camera right outside of the studio, I would show you my powder coat oven that has two head units
See?
mounted on the side of it,
Yes.
brother. Two oven head units that I have to hit
Yep.
to high broil on each one of them. I've got 4 elements inside, and
Uh-huh.
it's like 4 by 4 by 7.
Yep. Yeah.
As down and dirty as you can get. No
Yep. Down
PID,
there as you can
nothing
get.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
that's
Good
it.
for
And
you.
that's how I started, man. That's how I learned it. And I tell you what, I met some great people along the way from that. and I had my successes and I had my failures ultimately with the business. Gosh, that business grew. And so it grew, it just grew and grew and it took off really fast. And that was just the infancy of that thing at that time. So
Yeah,
while
and
we're doing this stuff,
if you let it be, that's a really high volume business too, isn't it, John?
yeah, yeah,
Like
it
you can
is.
have 100 things sitting on the floor, the small things that need to be done.
Yeah, at
Yeah,
$3 a piece,
exactly.
and you run them all in one batch, and boom, there's $300.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the beauty of that. And so that industry was in its infancy, and we actually, while we were building this stuff and experimenting, and we were coding our own stuff, we ended up at a Good Guys show. There was a Good Guys show in Indianapolis, and we had gone up there for the Good Guys show. It's up at the drag strip up there, and so we were walking around, and we there was a ITW GEMA booth up there. And I don't know if you know the ITW stuff. GEMA is their powder
Mhm.
coating distributor. And so we bumped into some folks there, and we filled out a comment card, and they were kind of gauging interest on powder coating in a smaller capacity, almost like a home capacity or like a small business type capacity. So Brad fills out this comment card. I don't know if I filled one out. I don't remember now, but he fills out a comment card, and we get a call from a guy named Jeff Hale. And Jeff, if you're out there, look me up. He's retired now, I believe, but he was the vice president or president of marketing for ITW GEMA. And so you imagine us, right? These podunk guys and one guy from Louisville and one guy from Southern Indiana. And we're building these crazy bikes and doing crazy stuff. And the next thing you know, we're getting a phone call from the guy who's the vice president of ITW GEMA. So he calls and he's like, "Hey man, we see what you guys are doing with your stuff, and you're doing small batch stuff and this and that." And they said, would you be interested in testing some products for us?" So we're like, "Well, heck yeah." So there was one that came down the line. I don't remember the model on it, but it was a big box unit. Like you could put a 50-pound box on it, but it was brand new. This stuff was designed and manufactured in Switzerland. And I tell you what, they ship that stuff over and they guard that stuff like it's a national security secret. I've never seen anything like it. So they
Really?
call us, yeah, they call us up and they say, "Hey man, we just got this thing. Like we just picked this thing up off the plane." And we're like, "Okay." They're like, "We're going to bring it down to you, and we're going to leave it there for like 6 months and you guys are going to test it." And we're like, "Okay." So, again, we're 20, 24 years old. We're like, "Sure, whatever. Okay." So they bring this thing down, and we put it in the shop. And this is my buddy's. He's got a 3-bay, just a 3-bay garage, a little bigger than a 3-bay garage, but it's a decent size, modest size. Let me say that. And here these guys pull up in the truck and they get out and this thing's covered up. And like I said, it's like ET's in there. So the Ark, from Indiana Jones, so they slide this thing out the back, and I swear, man, we
You
decrate
got a
this thing.
convoy of like black Suburbans.
Yeah, I was waiting for rays to shoot out of it and my face to melt off. So they cracked a crate on this thing, and I mean, it was a beauty. It was a beautiful piece of machinery. Yeah, they showed us how to use it, and basically what we would do is we would shoot it and use it. They had also come up with this attachment. It was a 3-pound fluidizing hopper as opposed to having to use a 50-pound box of powder. So you
Okay.
could buy, small batch powder, which I ended up getting hooked up with Brian from Columbia Coatings down in Columbia, Tennessee. But I used to buy a lot of my small batch stuff from them. And so instead of needing that big box, you could just do a small run. So that's what they really wanted us to test, was the small batch stuff, because they were looking to sell to a smaller market. So they had done some product testing with Wagner, and actually developed this thing in South America, and they were trying to test it in a North American market. So they brought it to us to test, and then they were going to try to introduce it. So we tested it for 6 months. We loved it. We used the life out of it and gave them great feedback on it. We made some modifications to it with them and everything. And then they took the unit back. And then eventually I actually ended up buying that unit back from them for pretty, significant discount, but I bought that
Yeah, I
thing back
bet.
from them. But yeah, so we had a good run with GEMA, and that was a lot of fun being involved with that. And that sort of drove me to push the product line. So again, that's why I said I continued to push and develop the stuff and get more and more advanced. So I was building electric units, I was building gas units. I had a company I was buying custom burners from, and then on bigger, like larger models, I was building some of the gas trains for that kind of stuff. So I got pretty heavily involved in it. It was a lot of fun. I did that for a while. And of course I was tinkering around motorcycles, and I ended up in, oh gosh, what was the magazine? I can't think of it now. Cycle Source. I ended up as a young and up and coming builder in Cycle Source magazine.
Really?
Yeah, 2000. I think I've got it. My office isn't set up yet. I'm using my wife's office right now, so my office isn't set up. So I don't have any of my goodies hanging up. I'm a tchotchke guy, I like junk all over the place.
Dude,
So I've got
mine's not set up either. It's been a process.
it is it's
Yeah.
same here. But I think I've got that frame somewhere. I was pretty proud of that. But yeah, that was early 2000. But yeah, we did hot bike shows, we did easy rider shows, we got invited to a lot of stuff doing some of the bikes and stuff. We just did a couple. I mean, we weren't like mass builders or anything. We did more parts than anything and more powder coating than anything. That was kind of the push because, like you said, it was the powder coating part of it is it's batch stuff. You know, you have 100 parts at
Yeah.
$3 or $4 a piece, and you know that's a run for the day. That's pretty good money. You know, or back then it was anyway. So again, just continued to build and tinker with stuff, and then I got into doing some structural steel in the shop, and then I get approached by a lot of the big contractors wanting us to do work. But I'll be honest, and I don't want to say I'm necessarily ashamed to say it, but I didn't know enough about bidding big jobs, and I didn't really know who to go to. I was always worried that if I reached out to the contractor and said, "Hey, man, I don't really know how to bid this," they would try to take advantage of me and say, "Well, you know, bid this and that." And then I realized years later, what it would have been advantageous to them to do that because then everybody would have been in trouble, you know.
That's
But
exactly right.
that
They're
was
looking for
one
subs for a reason, man.
right. So that was one
Yep.
leap I didn't take, one avenue I didn't explore that every once in a while I'll say, man, I wish I would have done that.
That gets
Ended up
boring.
closing that business, and my dad had actually, because I was doing a lot of powder coating, I started getting painting too. Dad retired out of his construction business, and then he got into to blasting, like media blasting, sand blasting, stuff like that. So he got into that, and then when I closed my shop, I moved a lot of my old equipment in his place, and so he started doing some finishing. So I was teaching him how to powder coat, so I was paying it back, right? He all
There
the
you go.
years he taught me everything, you know, it was my turn to teach him how to do something. So I taught him how to powder coat, taught him how to paint a little bit. I was a pretty good painter. I painted bikes and cars, and then we started doing some fleet work. We painted a whole fleet of concrete trucks one time. I remember I was telling my kids earlier that was the first time I'd ever driven an 18 speed. So that was a exciting adventure, man. So yeah, so we had the finishing business for a while, and then it took off, and he was doing pretty well with it, and I was getting kind of burned out on it. I ended up leaving there and went to a stainless code shop. We were doing all ASME code work. We were building like parts for like petroleum processing in the Middle East. All this stuff was being shipped overseas. We built several battery plants, or like like battery acid manufacturing plants. At least that's what this is stuff they're telling us anyway. But it
Uh-huh.
was all stainless code work, and that's where I really learned to TIG stainless, and I got better with pipe. I was TIGging a lot of stainless pipe, so that's where I kind of came back into the pipe game and started getting more interested in, you know, in pipe and pipe fitting and that sort of thing. So I worked there for a couple years, and we'll just suffice to say that a lot of us who worked there and the boss just didn't get along. So ended
Mm.
up part ways, and let's see, where did I go from there? Where did I go from there? I left there. I went back with the old man for a little bit. We were working together. We were doing some stuff. So I started doing a little bit of fabrication out of his shop. So I was doing a lot of actually like custom parts for motorcycles and cars and stuff like that. I started tinkering with building chassis. And about that same time, I was interested in welding pipe. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to go learn how to weld pipe. So I took a break and I ended up going to Hobart. That was my first introduction to Hobart. And I did what they used to call their nuclear and petrochemical pipe welding program, which was just basically just a TIG, a 2-inch TIG, a class. Let's see, I'm trying to think. It was 2-inch TIG, 6-inch stick pipe. I think there were a couple other things to that, but I just did the 2-inch and the 6-inch is what I ended up certified on. And then so I just, you know, got some brush up with my pipe. It had been a while since I had done anything like that since the shipyard. So I got some brush ups there with them. That was a great program, a lot of great people there, and I'm still a huge. I still, like I said, Bob and I, you know, he comes pretty regularly. I just saw him a couple days ago, or was yesterday? Yeah, it was last night. He come down for our industry expo, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, it's just again back to that networking, meeting those people, and I met a lot of good people in
Yeah.
Hobart. When I got back, when I came back as an instructor, as a teacher, that was one of the first places I reached out to, you know, was those guys because you know, again, I knew, you know, I'd been there, I'd seen their reputation, and they're great with their returning students. You know, if you want to come in for a brush up or whatever, if you're looking for a job, or you know, they're great about, you know, alumni, you know, taking care of alumni. So I thought, yeah, I'm gonna reach out to them, and they were great. That's how I ended up actually meeting Mark,
Okay.
your co-conspirator there,
Yeah.
and yeah, so it kind of just went from there. So.
Okay. Very cool. So let me ask you this. How old were you when you went through the Hobart?
Oh, let's see. That was, oh man, I think that was, you know what? I could look it up. See if
So for
don't,
people that don't know, Hobart Institute of Welding Technology is a school in Troy, Ohio, and one of the most reputable welding schools, if not the most reputable welding school on the planet. I mean, it's just been in existence forever, and I'm blessed enough to have them in my backyard, man, for the
backyard.
support. Absolutely. So we're really and they host our Skills USA competition, so they're heavily involved in our programs. Great school, but anyway, they offer these classes, and you know, I'm assuming you had to leave Shelby County for a little bit and hang out in Troy.
Well, so yeah, so what I did was, I actually I drove one, I don't it was one weekend. I said I'm gonna drive up there and take a look. Or one week, I was like a Friday or something. I drove up there and I went in and talked to them and told them, I already had about a decade of experience under my belt at that time, and I had welded pipe before, in the shipyard, but I really hadn't done much since then. Other than I did a lot of TIG. The coat shop was all TIG, so I wanted brush ups on everything. So anyway, so I just wanted to go back for for the education's sake. I went up there and looked around and talked to them, and again gave them my resume and my experience, and so they allowed me to test out of a bunch of stuff. So that's why I didn't have to do a lot of prerequisites. I was only there for maybe, gosh, I don't remember now, maybe 2 months,
Okay.
2.5 months, something like that, just enough to do those two classes.
And did you live there? Did you live in
Yeah.
Troy?
So what I did was I the first week I was there, I got a hotel. I stayed in the hotel, and so I thought, well, some of these guys that are in here are probably renting a place, and I could talk to them and figure something out. So I got into class, and one of the guys next to me, we just started talking to guys on break and stuff, and so we were talking, and he says, "Yeah, I've got an apartment," and I said, "Well, would you mind if would you be cool if I paid you? I'll split your rent. I'll pay you half. If I can stay." I said, "I'm just gonna stay basically Sunday through Friday." I said, "You'll have the weekends. I'd go home on the weekends." He said, "Sure." So I gave him his money, and I stayed there, had a key and everything. And what I would do is on the weekend, Friday we'd finish up, and I'd go home on Friday night. And then I was actually building hot rod chassis in my dad's blasting shop on the weekend. I'd run home. I'd get down there super early on Saturday morning. I'd start, putting everything together, and I'd finish two or three of them in a weekend, and then I'd bundle them all up. And then on Monday, truck would come, and the old man would take the forklift and put them on there, and they'd be gone for me. So, but that's actually how I paid for school, and that's how I paid for my way through welding school, was by building hot rod chassis.
That's awesome.
So I yeah, so I paid my way doing that, and then yeah, I finished Hobart. I say don't laugh at me, but I'm actually going through my old pipe fitting manual from Hobart. I'm pulling some stuff out and show my kids some stuff. So it's sitting here. I was looking at it before we came on, but
Yeah.
I was telling Bob this story. I had my books from the class, the 2-inch class and the 6-inch class, and in those books I actually found the receipts, my transcripts, my original paperwork we signed, and all that stuff was stuffed in there. It's still in there. So I thought that was pretty funny.
That
I was
is
showing
pretty
it
neat.
today. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you take
So
that in to show your students?
I haven't yet actually. I've had, it's oddly enough, I've had the books in there for a while, but I picked them up and brought them home the other day because I was looking through them. I finally have some kids who are interested. I finally have some of my kids that are interested in TIG and pipe, because I love the TIG pipe, and so finally getting them into it. So I was just pulling up some stuff, some little exercises and some diagrams out of there to show them, run copies and show them and stuff like that. So that's why I was getting those books out. But anyway, I found them when I brought them home to find this stuff, and that's when I came across them. So I haven't shown them yet, but I'm going to show them. Yeah, I'm going to show them sometime here.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
So you got into so after Hobart, you got into pipe welding.
hmm
And who did you go to work for after you left
I
Hobart?
left. Let's see. After I left Hobart, I came home. I did some shutdowns in Louisville. I did, a few like of the staffing places,
Mhm.
Grust and those kinds of places. The more industrial, that's obviously what I was looking for. The more industrial kind of stuff. I was going through those agencies, and I did several shutdowns in Louisville. And then I actually came up here to one of the power plants in Kentucky. It was one of the first power plants I ever tested there and tested in, and was there for a little bit. And then kind of jumped around, like doing that kind of thing. And then, so I was actually my buddy Brad, he long windy path for him as well, ended up in Florida. And so he said, "Man, come down here. There's a bunch of stuff going on down here." So I went down to Florida, and we were working in the Panhandle. We worked at a couple of yards down there, and we were doing side stuff. There was these guys that needed these dumpsters welded, so we did that on the side. We always had side work, always. As a welder, you either work
Yep.
80 hours at your job or you work 40 at home and 40 at work. You know, you always have a side hustle.
That's exactly
Everybody
right.
needs something made, fabricated, welded. So we were doing this dumpster thing on the side, and we were working these yards, and we did some random stuff for some construction companies around there. And then I ended up, I got a phone call. Company reached out. One of those personnel companies reached out and wanted me to go take a test over at Space Coast for and a scheduled, gosh, what was that? A scheduled 20 aluminum. Yeah, it was like some kind of a scheduled 20 aluminum tube for Johnson Space Center.
Oh
And
wow.
so I was like, okay, sure. So I'm not an excuse maker, but I'll tell you what happened. I get over there and I get my coupons, and the guy, first of all, the guy gives me one of those 400 amp torches. It's about the size of I don't even know. I don't know, about the size of my thigh. And so I'm trying to
Weighs
hold this
weighs 30 pounds.
30 pounds. And meanwhile, I've got schedule 20 right there. And, you know, it's not schedule 20 aluminum at that.
Man.
So I prep everything up, and I always checked in. I guess it's a good thing, but I always checked with everybody. Hey, can I, grind the inside of this? That's okay with you guys, right? I can grind this, right? That's okay with you guys, right? I always checked, just double checked. And I told the inspector, I said, look, I'm not a dummy. I just want to make sure you're okay with it. I don't want to do
Yeah.
this and then you bust me out because I did this and didn't ask you, and they always respected that. So
No, and
he
I think
says,
that's important to highlight, that to know the parameters of a test. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
anything
of
you're going to
course.
do. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Know what guidelines you have to work within, and that helps you, even more so in the prep for that test. Absolutely, I agree with
Yeah,
you. Yeah,
absolutely. And a lot of times I tell my kids, we go to competition, I tell them the same thing, guys, double check with the person who's running the show, make sure this is exactly what they're asking for. You know, sometimes they'll tell you yes or no, sometimes they won't. That's fine too. But I tell them it never hurts to ask,
that's
make this is
exactly right.
this,
No, you look at the
or
judge and you say, "Oh, can I use this straight edge to make this flame cut?"
right.
And you might have been the only person in that competition to ask, and he looks at you and says, "Yeah," and everybody else is
Yes.
using that shaky ass
Uh-huh.
hand cut.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it never hurts to ask.
It never hurts to ask. So I get down there and get the coupons and everything's all set up. And so I'm, cleaning them up really good, wiping them down and whatnot, and, a little bit of grinding on them. And I, I asked the guy, I said, is it okay if can I grind this out? And he said, no. And I said, okay, well, what had happened is there was like a little burr in there. And I said, could I grind that out? And he says, no. And I said, okay, all right. And so I'm assuming he knows that this is in there.
Yeah.
So I sit down, knock it out real fast. Looked pretty good, I thought. And he's, man, that looks really good. He was excited. That looks really good. I'm like, okay, cool.
Mm.
He takes a mirror down there and he goes, well, what's that? And I said, that's that burr I told you about. He said, well, why didn't you grind that out? And I said, because you told me I couldn't. He said, no, I didn't say that. I said, man, I promise you said that I asked you. You said no. I would have done it otherwise. I said, I
Mm.
know about it, which is why I pointed it out to you. Well, of course, and I did it. And I understand. I
Right.
understand. He bust me out. Well, I'd been there all day. And meanwhile, we're standing, I don't know how, we weren't far from the beach, I don't think. So it's already steamy and hot and steamier and hotter, and I was tired and I was done, and I just was kind of aggravated, and I said, man, I'm going home. So I called my brother. I said, I'm done. I ended up flying back to Panama City, and then I got in the truck and ended up coming home. And then from there, oh gosh, let's see, where did I go from there? See, that was I ended up. Oh, so after that, I ended up getting. I come across an ad, of course, back in the days of Craigslist when I didn't even know
Yeah.
if that's around. To be honest with
I don't
you,
know. Man, I think about that from time to time. But yeah, old Craigslist. I have no idea.
so back in the day when actually there were decent jobs that people would post on Craigslist, I got on there. I found all kinds of actually pretty good jobs. Back then it
Mhm.
was $30 an hour and like $100 a day per diem. That was pretty good. So I was traveling and doing just random, like type contract type jobs. So I come across an ad for the 110 in Norfolk, plumbers and pipe fitters. I said, sure, why not? So I called them up. They said, sure, fly down. We set up a test date. I flew down. I ran a piece of 6 inch. The guy looked at it. He said, man, you're in. He said, I got to send it out, but you're in. I'm like, okay. And they sent it out and everything came back good. And so, yeah, so I ended up swearing in. I got my card through them. I traveled a little bit under them just again, some just, short those 6-month jobs, 2-month jobs here and there. I did that for a while and just kind of got tired of being out on the road. And it just, I don't know if you've been on, I'm sure you have. I know most guys are on the road. Yeah, that's right. You have. Yeah, I forget. Yeah, you travel
Yeah.
too. So,
Yeah.
man, you get tired of being out there. So I just thought, man, I want to stay home and do something. I actually ended up taking a little break from welding. And I got into law enforcement, and I ended
Okay.
up in New Orleans, and I went through their training academy, got out, got all the way to the end of my field training. And once again, differences of maybe personality. I don't know. I don't like gripers and complainers. I don't like whiners, as my mom used to tell my niece. Don't be a whiner. I don't like. Meemaw doesn't like whiners. I think that's what she used to say. But yeah, so I don't like gripers and complainers. And if any of you guys hear me out there, I love most of you, but there was a lot of gripers and complainers there, and it was nonstop, and it was coming from the highest levels down, and I just got worn out with it. So I hadn't even finished my field training. I came back here, and I had actually, well, here's another Mr. J, little offshoot. I ran a pretty successful firearms training company for about 4 years. I taught uh, about 4,300 students over that 4-year period. And then that's kind of led me to get interested in getting into law enforcement. So I
Awesome.
ran, yeah, that was pretty cool, man. That was a lot of
So
fun.
was
I'm
that like
actually
CCW classes or what? Or,
a lot of concealed carry classes. I did a lot of private. I mean, anybody who was interested,
okay.
I taught law enforcement. I taught military. I taught anybody who was interested. I made some
That's
good
awesome.
friends over the year, through that. Met a lot of really cool people. Did a lot of high level training. Did some training with some former air marshals. That was some of the best training I'd ever been through. So I've had some fairly high level training. I've trained with like guys like Masad Ayub and some of those guys. Yeah, I
Okay.
did that for a
Okay.
few years, and then that industry got kind of weird. So I left, ended up getting out of that. I got back into construction, and then was kind of doing my own thing, running my own business. So I ran my own business for several years, and then this opportunity came up at the ATC. I had actually, when I came back from New Orleans, I had worked there just for a short time. I was working with ESL students. I'm helping them doing translations and stuff for them for like automotive and some of the other classes. And then so I had experience there before. So that again, back to that networking, knowing those people, that opportunity came up. I knew those folks. I reached out to them, and they said, "Hey, yeah, we'd love to have you." Of course, I had to go through the hiring process. There were a couple other candidates, but I think I scored better on my testing and that sort of thing, or whatever. However, I ended up there. And I'm in my second year there. So
So in
that's
your second year, and you've got high school juniors and seniors.
10th, 11th, and 12th.
So
Yeah,
10th,
10,
11th.
11th. Yeah, and
Okay.
I'm actually considering. I'm thinking not obviously not next year because we're already set up for next year, but the year after, I think I'm going to push it into a 4-year program. I'm going to start taking freshmen.
Okay.
I want my thing is I just want more time, and I feel like the more time I have with them, the slower pace I can run. That means they're going to get more burn time on the critical stuff in the beginning. More, like this year, my pace is radically changed from last year. Last year I was trying to keep it like a college kind of pace, and that just did
Uh,
not work. And
uh,
so this year, I mean, we're moving at a snail's pace, and I already have some kids that have certified.
awesome.
That's how, just taking that slow pace and making sure they really understand the fundamentals. I mean, we started out
Yeah.
with beads on a pad. We ran all positions, all rides, and that took some time because I had them about little over 5 hours a week, so that took some time to get that done. Especially with the number of kids I have. I have 84 in the program. I have 4 classes a day, so I have about 20 kids in a class. So most of the time they're splitting time in a booth, so they're not necessarily getting that full amount of time out there. So for the amount of work that they put in this short period of time, again, their skills have improved very, very fast. I mean, I've got some of my previous students coming in saying, man, we didn't move that, we didn't get that good in that short a period of time. So I think for me, the secret sauce for me has just been pacing it, a little bit slower, taking my time with them, making sure they understand those fundamentals, and just really having them, burn a lot. I think the burn time in the booth, that's probably one of the most important things, or time under the hood. Let me say that is just the absolute most important thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That muscle
yeah, that's
memory, you can't replace that.
absolutely, yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And it's funny to see how fast they pick up, like striking an arc. That first week, it's like a disaster. It's like a lightsaber fight going on in the booth. It's like,
Yeah.
man, is this day ever going to end? Is this week ever going to end? And then they finally learn to
Yeah.
strike, and it's like, ooh, okay. we're past that now finally,
Man,
So
and I go through some, I guess, self-inflicted pain. I don't allow my students to use auto darkening hoods when they're first learning.
okay, okay,
I don't allow that, man. I make them use a passive lens fixed shade. I want my students to, and I only get them for 2 years, but I get them for 2.5 hours a day
okay,
as juniors and seniors, and I want them to feel the arc. I want them to feel that strike. I want them to hear the strike, and the last thing I want them to do is see it. Because
okay,
after when you get that down, when all of that makes sense,
okay,
I mean, these kids, and I find that I allow them to, after 6 weeks, they're allowed to bring in their auto darkening hoods.
sure.
But that foundational, let's learn to strike arcs. I don't know. It's just something about,
I like that.
I feel like it makes them, it puts them more in tune with the process, if that
Sure.
makes any sense.
Yeah, no,
They're not
absolutely.
not looking for the arc. They're feeling it, they're hearing it, and then the last component is seeing it. And I feel like that engages them a little bit better in that foundational learning at that point in time. But yeah, man, I mean, it's a chore. And then, I don't know, man. I think there's been more cuss words created since I was a kid, because I hear things coming out of those booths when they're learning how to strike that I've never
Yeah,
heard before, brother.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They'll teach you
And
some things.
and that's and that's another part of. I want to go back to what we were talking about, but that's another part of, and hopefully you see this with CTE education, vocational education, is that that happens,
Yeah.
and that's the grace that we have to give them sometimes. I think is
Mm.
understanding that frustration. I've been there, you've been there,
Oh gosh.
So yeah, just grab them like, hey man, just mumble it, mumble a little bit lower. All right,
Yep.
say it a little bit lower, just so nobody else hears it necessarily. I don't care that you say it, just try to keep it to yourself a little bit.
There's
So
a
yeah,
shop. You know what? There's stuff that flies in the shop that may not in the hallways. You know what I mean?
exactly,
And that's just the
exactly,
way
and
it
that's
is.
and it's great. And I tell you what, I think that's another one of the successes with us. At least, hopefully, in some way, counterbalancing that full day of the like they come with us, they can wear their ball caps and all
Yep.
that kind of stuff. We don't. There's no problem with that. I mean, that's how you're going to dress in the field. They
That's
show
exactly
up
right.
like that, and then it's just nice that they can go through the day and have some a break from the I guess I kind of like I don't want to frown on the other the homeschools, but the strictness and that sort of thing in the homeschool. So I think they get to kind of relax a little bit with us and kind of let it down a little bit and have some fun. And that's a big thing. So you talked about energy. For me, that's one of the big things for me is just having fun. And I tell all my kids, having fun is a really important piece of this.
Mm.
Even in your as you go out in an upper level, have a little bit of fun with it, make some friends. But I always tell them, if you do go to like a post-secondary training school for welding, get in that booth and work your butt off. Don't stop. Spend as much time in there as you
Mhm.
possibly can, but have fun at the same time. But I think that's one of the other sort of attractions maybe in my class is that, yeah, we do have some fun, we do some wild things, we do some crazy stuff. A lot of my videos, some is just some of the funny outtakes and silly stuff that we do back there. But you have to break that up. You have to show them that it's okay to have a little fun too. Because we're doing the way I see it, we're doing pretty serious work out there. We're doing really
Yeah.
serious stuff that's and not just serious from a danger perspective, but serious work. I mean, this is work that can change the world. Really,
And it,
and
it
it's
has
like that.
real consequences.
That's it right there. And that's what brings it home, I think, is the consequences that it involves. And once they understand that, I think they start taking it a whole lot more serious.
Yep.
We talk about industrial accidents all the time and engineering failures and all kinds of stuff. And we do bin
Yeah.
tests on the regular. I mean, my thing with the kids is give it a shot and try it and give it your best, and we'll bend it to see what it does. So you need, know what you need to do next time. So they see bend tests on the regular, so they know that welds are not fail proof and the importance of prep and being ready and doing your job with integrity every time. They get to see that firsthand, I think, at a bend test.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
what you were saying about the feeling and becoming a part of that, it's really funny that you say that. I think a lot of times we don't talk enough about the other parts of welding besides just our hands and eyes, right? I
Yeah.
always talk to them about what does it sound like? If you can
Mhm.
feel it,
Yeah.
for me, you get that weird rhythm you get with the MIG, the or, and I tell them, I
Hmm.
said, once you get that going, if it sounds good, run it. You're good at
Yeah.
that point. And I
Yeah.
said,
And
but
yeah,
you
and that
have to,
sound.
yeah, you
Yeah.
have to pick up on that. And I said, that's another way you keep rhythm. I said, listen to it.
Yeah.
You're running. 60-10, you're running that open root on a piece of pipe. It sounds
Right
like
there.
bacon frying on the backside, and then you get that rhythm. You feel it.
Sometimes you can't even see you can't see the penetration on that open root
Absolutely.
60-10. You hear the
Yep.
penetration. And
Right.
if you're in an avid if you're in a position where you could see that pin coming out the backside, then okay.
Yep.
But until then, you're relying on that sound of that
Yep.
penetration. And that because the visual puddle itself from the outside, that can be deceiving. So
Absolutely.
once you hear that penetration, you're right. You're
Yeah.
exactly right.
It's there. So I'm always, tell them, like you said, listen for it, feel for it. It'll feel, and I tell them, I say, you guys laugh at me, but that 60-10, when it's running right, you'll feel it. When that
Mhm.
70-18 is running right, you'll feel it. I always to me, that was always just the downside of like TIG, was that you didn't feel it so much, but you could feel it in like walking the cup and your rhythm and that sort of thing. If
Right.
you walked it, or your rhythm as you're moving, if you're freehanded or whatever, you feel that part of it, but you don't really feel it like you do with like stick or MIG.
No, because
But
with stick and MIG, if you feel that, and
yeah,
you're exactly right. You can feel when it's doing what it's supposed to, but you can also feel when it's not doing what it's supposed to, and you can feel it
exactly.
immediately and
Yes.
make changes.
Yep.
But when you're taking something out and you end up with some big random swirl in a puddle, and you're like, "What the hell? How did that happen?"
How did that
You
happen?
know, you just got to deal with it.
Right.
There's hardly any counter. You can still see things coming. You can
Yeah.
forecast mistakes, but not
Yeah.
like you can with MIG or stick. Yeah, you're exactly
Right.
right.
Right. Yeah. You can see the changes. Yeah. You can feel and all the, adjust on the fly. And
Yep.
that's another, phrase I always use to kids. I said, welding is nothing but just, it's decision making on the fly. That's what you're
Mhm.
doing. You're assessing what's going on with your puddle. You're assessing what's going on with your weld. And then you have to make those decisions, those changes. I said, they're instantaneous. They're moment to
Yeah.
moment. I said, if everything's set and it's running right, it should run pretty smooth, and, you don't have to make a lot of changes, but you run along, that 70-18 starts a toenail or something crazy on you, it's got moisture on it or whatever. You
Yep.
got to compensate, roll your wrists, do some different things. And that's what I tell them. That's the kind of stuff you got to watch for, and, the kind of stuff you got to learn. So
Arc blow on
yeah,
those 60-10s.
oh yeah, oh man.
Yeah, those are
Ooh,
quick
yeah.
adjustments.
Yes.
Bury it
Yep. Yep.
as fast as you can.
That's yeah, and that's another funny thing. They're learning on the open reads. A lot of them, they're having the trouble with running a low amperage on those things. They
Mm.
stick, they stick, they stick. And it's like, you got to heat the puddle up, guys. You got to get it hot before you jump out there on the plate. So
Yep.
that's another thing, them taking their time. But I was that way. I was actually thinking about that, and I told someone that. I said, when I was not necessarily your age, but my first few years of my welding career, I was, hot to go, man, burn hot and fast, and let's roll. And
Yeah.
then as I grew, I learned to finesse it a whole lot more. And I tell you what, I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed gouging so much, was because there was a lot of finesse to it.
Mhm.
And that I teach gouging in my class, and that's definitely, that's what they see. I tell them, I said, this is just a finesse thing, really. Once you get it set just right and you get that good liquid puddle moving, I mean, you can just push that thing. I mean, gosh, we gouged the whole side of a barge in a couple hours, I guess. A
Really?
good 40 to 60 feet. Yeah, you could gouge that whole thing out in a couple hours.
Wow.
So yeah, and then then we started doing other things. We used it to wash off, like we would have dogs, pull dogs. We would
Mhm.
weld it on one sheet to pull them together. Let me stick my hand up there to pull them together, and then we would gouge them off, and then we'd come back and we would turn that gouge down really low, and we just use it to wash off that little bit of excess of weld metal. And
Like
I got
scarfing
to the
off a
point where
backing
I could
strip on a plate.
they pretty much,
Yeah.
yeah, I could
Yeah.
clean that down nice and clean. You almost couldn't tell there was anything there other than it was shiny metal. So we got like I said, got finesse with that, and got finesse with the 60-10. And we were running those 532 60-10s, and I mean they were monster ride. And it's funny, I look now, I'm running 1/8 inch, and I'm like, these things are so small.
Yeah.
I was used to running
Yeah.
those giant rods for so long.
Yeah.
It's
So tell me about the transition into education, because here's my
Yep.
assessment. I've been doing this for 13 years. Okay. And I can pick out an instructor that doesn't have any problems with kids. And I'm looking at one. I can tell you right now that I can very confidently say my assessment of you in a short period of time is that these kids absolutely love you, and they'll go to the end of the earth to make you proud. That's off the cuff assessment, man. How right am I? I'm
You're
dead
right
on, but you
on,
don't even
man.
have
You're
to
dead
tell me.
on. Yeah,
I
yeah,
know I
you're
am.
dead on with that.
I know I am. What was
I
that
it,
adjustment like?
Well, having spent some time with adult education, the teaching part, the welding part was natural. The teaching part was natural, or I had experience with both, obviously. But putting those together and presenting that to going from like an adult, like I said, education audience to, a high school teenager audience, that was a little bit of a shift. But here's the way I see it. I when I first my first class that I walked in, so I actually started last year. I started my first year. I think I was like 6 or 7 days late. They had to do all the paperwork and everything. So I was several days late getting started in the year. So when I first got to the ATC, I went in, they gave me my keys and here's this and here's this and here's this and let's do this. And so my principal, wonderful principal, Dr. Meadway, she said, you want to teach today? Like, do you want to have the kids today, or do you just want kind of a day to figure some stuff out? And I said, I'd love to have a day or two to figure some stuff out. And she said, sure. What I did is I gathered them all in the auditorium, and then that's where they gather them, I should say. And then I would go in at the beginning of every class, introduce myself. I'm Mr. Jenkins. You can call me whatever you want to call me, Jenkins, whatever, Mr. J, whatever. So I get a lot of it, but the Mr. J thing just kind of stuck.
Mhm.
But anyway, I would go in and introduce myself and tell them, hey, this is what I'm here to do. I'm here to teach you how to weld. I'm going to give you the same level of respect that you give me. I said, I'm probably going to treat you a lot differently than most of your teachers treat you. I'm going to treat you more like adults because we are doing adult things here. This is, again, serious business. This stuff is dangerous, and not just, again, the danger part, but the gravitas of the work that we're doing, that people could die if we screw this up.
Yep.
So I just said, you guys have to, basically it was, you guys have to be adults about this. You guys have to act as mature as you can about this. And I know that really sounds silly, crazy, but it seemed to have had a little bit of hold. And then I told him, I said, look, at that time, I've been welding 21 years, and, I said, I've got a few certifications under my belt. I've welded a few things. And I said, but on the flip side of that, I said, the same way I'm teaching you guys to be welders. I said, conversely, I kind of need you guys to help teach me to be a teacher. So I said, whatever suggestions that you might have, as long as they're serious suggestions, I'm open to anything that you guys are interested in learning or doing, or if you don't understand or you don't like a technique that I'm using or something, it's not working for you, I need to find another way. Talk to me about that, because I try, again, I have some teaching experience, but I try to reach out in a lot of different ways. um, but I find great videos. And shout out to the WeldTube guys out there. That's some of my favorite videos. I love those. And of course, weld.com, welding tips and tricks. And, there's a lot of great guys out there. If I don't mention you, I'm sorry. You guys are doing phenomenal videos. Please keep it up. Those of us as educators, we use those videos, and we really like those videos because you guys are real guys, real people, real gals. I'm sorry, I don't mean to just keep saying guys. Real guys out there doing stuff, and you have experience in the industry, like Mike. You guys want to share that knowledge. Again, please keep that up, because I use a lot of that in my classroom, and I'm for me, be from social media, so I'm always trying to repost and connect with people that have things that I can share with my students. So yeah, thank you for everybody that creates, because as educators, we use that stuff regularly, and it really,
Yeah,
really helps
we
out. I try to bring
definitely
in
do.
a lot of different dimensions, the videos, the social media. I do a lot of whiteboard stuff, drawing, sketching. We're going over weld symbols right now and doing a lot of drawing on the board and stuff like that. But again, most of the time I'm just trying to get them out there in the shop as quick as I can, get them under the
Mm,
hood, get them as much time as I can. And, that's just, I guess, been the success. And I love what I do. I love going there every day. It doesn't feel like a job. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like a job. It's just something I love to do. Initially, I hated the paperwork, but I figured a lot of it out, and so now I'm able to navigate that. So it makes things, much better and easier for me. So that just gives me more time to focus on what I'm doing with them. But yeah, this has probably been one of the best things I've ever done. Most of the time, folks ask me, what do you think about, what do you think about work? And I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever done. So it's a good feeling to go home at night, and then hopefully it made a difference in somebody's life, some way, shape, or form.
Oh,
So
dude, I guarantee you have, brother. I guarantee you have. There's, again, you just real recognize real, man. And I could tell,
thank you.
I know for
I
a
appreciate
fact you're
that.
making a huge impact with your students. No doubt in my mind. One of the that's one of the best things about being an educator. And I tell people this all the time. Especially when I was in the miscellaneous steel business, I've done projects from east to west coast, north and south, and everybody everywhere in between. And some of the most high profile malls, stadiums, glass rail, miles of glass railing,
Mhm.
all over the place in some really cool places. But there is nothing more rewarding
Yep.
than this job. There's
Absolutely.
just simply not. And you can't put that on one kid. You can't put that on one experience.
Right.
It's the whole thing, man, when it comes together and you just look around and smile. And
Oh yeah.
it's just an unbelievable feeling to know that you're able to pass something on that's been so good to you,
Yes.
and it's provided opportunity for you that otherwise may not have been there, and you're passing that on to somebody else. And some of these kids, we talk a lot, John, about breaking generational poverty. Man,
Yes.
some of these kids have watched mom and dad, I'm just going to say it, collect a check from the couch, or have just not been led
Yes.
with the grit, with the work ethic, and you get the opportunity to turn that around. You get the opportunity to break generational poverty, dude. And there is nothing more powerful than that. And I'm assuming that in Shelby County, Kentucky, you're pretty rural. Is that a
Yeah,
fair assessment?
we're pretty rural. We are the city of Shelbyville is a decent sized town.
Okay.
But still we're pretty, we're still pretty agrarian, a lot of farming, a lot of ranching. Actually most of the teachers at school ranch, they have some sort of farm something. But
Okay.
yeah, it's still pretty rural. Now there's a lot of urban sprawl coming that way from Louisville because we're about 30 to 40 minutes depending on where you are in Louisville. From
Okay.
there, but yeah, so yeah, we're getting a little bit of urban sprawl from there, but again, it's still pretty much, yeah, and I do see everything that you're talking about. You talk about the
Mm.
generational poverty, absolutely, man. My family, we were kind of, I don't know, we were the working class. I guess we were poor and I didn't know it. They did a pretty good job of covering it, but that was old man being a contractor in the 80s. Stuff was up and down. It was feast or
Oh
famine.
yeah.
So some years were great. We'd take vacation, and then there'd be several years we didn't get one, or we grew up chopping wood and doing that sort of thing. So yeah, I pretty much worked my entire life. I really can't remember a time where I didn't, other than being
Yeah.
hurt or something like that. But yeah, don't remember
Right.
much of the time it didn't work. So, but yeah, it's nice to try to set a good example and I try to tell good stories and positive things. But yeah, definitely, there's so much opportunity, especially in welding right now. All the stats and statistics, talking
Man.
about 300 to 600,000 welders. I think, is it Andrew Brown? I think is
Mhm.
that, yeah, he was talking about that on his podcast about 600 DOD needing like 600,000 some odd electricians and welders by like
Yeah.
29, or something crazy like that. I mean, I tell these kids, the opportunities abound, it's limitless, it seems, in welding right now. So,
Yeah, it
and
really is, and it's one of those things. It's one of those skills that can lead you to multiple different trades, and it can lead you to literally anywhere in the world if that's
oh,
where you want to go.
absolutely.
Man,
Yeah.
I've got students that are commercial dive international
Nice.
certified dive welders that spent 6 months in Norway training. I mean, it's
That,
just you look at some of this stuff, man, and it's just incredible the places that these kids are taking it. And I get to hear these stories coming back to me, and
right.
it's unbelievable.
And the opportunity, I don't know about you, but I tell them, I said, I know a lot, obviously a lot of this stuff was around, in my earlier years. I said, but the connectivity, the connection, the community that has grown
Yeah.
around, especially around welding, I said has grown. It's so crazy. I remember getting into it, and we early on at my first shop, we incorporated MySpace, early social media, into our marketing plan. And we would find people from all across the country and companies and stuff, and we would do like shout outs to them. It was like the first shout outs. We had these big white pieces of paper. We would write, my company was called Wise Guys. We'd say Wise Guys love, West Coast choppers, and we'd put it on their page or whatever, and they'd be like, rock on, man, or stuff like that.
That's awesome.
The first, yeah, I mean, the first shout out type stuff. So we were doing a lot of early stuff, and I tell all the guys, I'm like, if you guys ever have any stuff you can find, the guys that used to work for me, if you find any of that stuff, send it, because it's crazy. I don't even know if that stuff even exists or is possibly still be around. But yeah, we were doing a lot of that kind of stuff in the day. And I think it's funny to see how we were trying to do influencing with welding and fabrication stuff like a lot of those early shows were doing. And how it's become now, it's like welders are rock stars now. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, it's wild to me, someone, I'm going on 22 years now in the industry, and it's cool to see. I dig it. It's kind
Yeah.
of given me a new look on a lot of things, and especially coming in as an educator. So now I'm trying to do the rock star social media thing to to bring attention to my program, to support my
Yeah,
kids and get those kids out there, show people what we're doing. So it's just,
absolutely.
again, how it's grown is so wild to me.
So with teaching, what is do you have a single story? And I know this is only your second year, but is there a story that comes across, that stands out? It's one of your favorite stories, or interaction with a student, or that time maybe when a student was struggling for so long and it just clicked, or anything of the nature. What is it to this point where you've been that made you step back and say, "Yep, this is where I belong. This is why I'm here." What would that moment be?
Well, I've had a lot of smaller moments
Mhm.
along this journey so far that have sort of culminated, I guess, into this ultimate feeling. But there's been several times where I've got several students who actually, a couple of my girls that like to compete and are excellent competitors, excellent welders, or some couple of the best welders in the program. But when I would come to them and introduce a new skill, like when I got to the program, they still had not done any open root stuff, and so of course they hated 6010 because they really hadn't ran much of it, and this sort of misunderstood a lot of it. And so
Mhm.
I introduced them to that. I'm like, all right, here's the 6010. This is how we run it. We worked on that, and then I remember we put the first open route together and ran it, and it was probably the second. Well, honestly, it could have been the first, but I was going to say it was the second one she ran. I mean, the route was just absolutely flawless, not a spot in it, just perfect. And that was like, one of those yes moments. But I've had several of those. That one stands out. But I've had several with, again, I just had several with students. Some of my first years that struggle with some of the we start getting out of position. We're getting into 3F or 3G or, 4F or 4G, we're getting the crazy stuff, and they start to get a little nervous and they freak out about it. And you get them in there and you calm them down, and they really enjoy it. There's one little, oh, yeah. So one thing does come to mind, and it's funny because it's not necessarily directly connected to school, but we participated in what's called the Shelby County Cultural Fest. We're a pretty diverse community in Shelbyville, Shelby County, and so it was just a great festival that was put on by departments in school, to celebrate the different, the cultures and things that we have there. So we signed up to go to be there and represent the ATC and the welding program. So we've got a little Miller generator welder. So I threw that in my trailer and loaded up a little stand, and so we set up basically out there to weld. And we were letting people come along. They put on the gear, and it was myself and a couple of my students. We were out there working with everybody. So we'd allow, some people to come in and run a little bit. So it was a lot of younger kids. Well, there was a little girl that came up, and she, like, no fear, no nerves, I mean, no hesitation whatsoever. Just walked right up, said, I want to do this, put a gear on her. I walked her over there, grabbed her by the hand, and said, this is, called striking an arc. And she said, okay. And we did it. And I ran with her for a little bit, and then I let go. And that little girl carried the bead all the way across the plate. And then she came back and struck her own arc and carried another bead across the plate, and came back and struck the arc again and carried another bead across the plate. And I was like, I don't know what I'm witnessing here, some kind of welding miracle. And I looked at her parents and said, please, please remember to sign her up for welding when she's ready, when she gets to that age. So I think she had like 3 years. And I was like, please get her to sign up for the program because she's just a natural. I don't even know how to explain this. So that was kind of fun, to see.
Yeah.
Um,
Wait till she
but my,
comes in.
right, oh, I know, right? I can't
Yeah, I've
wait. I
had that
can't wait.
so many times. Yeah.
That's gonna be our next national competitor that comes from Kentucky. It'll be her,
Mm,
that little girl there.
that's awesome.
But probably the moment, that moment that you said, it's, yeah, this is culminated into what I wanted it to be. These things are going, the kids are getting out of it. I feel like they're getting out of it what they need to get out of it, and the program is really starting to thrive and take off. We were actually we were at AWA for their senior welding competition a few weeks ago. It was February 7th. So the wife and I go. We went last year. We went this year, of course. We took a couple competitors, a couple of my boys this year, and so they were competing. And I was running around there. I was going to do my little short interviews I like to do, and the microphone broke. So we
Mm,
ran out for a second, ran across the street to Walmart to grab another mic, and so we run out, and then we come back. Or no, we ran out. I grabbed the mic. We came out. We were in the car, and so that weekend we had that competition in Missouri. But then we also ended up with our regional skills was the same weekend. it was supposed to be the weekend before, but because of all the snow and everything that we had, everything was shut down. So they had pushed it to the next weekend. Well, we had already had hotel reservations and everything
Oh
for the
man.
competition in Missouri. So it broke my heart, but I told my kids that were competing in regionals, my guys here, and they understood. They were very gracious and they understood. So I sent 4 welders for welding one and welding, and then we sent a fab team of 3 for the fabrication welding part of it. And so we're sitting in the parking lot of Walmart, and I'm goofing with this little microphone, and my phone rings, and it's one of my team captain, Josh, of the fab team. He calls me just, Mr. J, Mr. J, Mr. J, we won. And he's yelling, and so in the car, I'm screaming, yeah, so we're all screaming, and, and then it wasn't long after that, he goes, oh, Katie, she got second. She's going to state. So I had one of my
Wow.
welders. Yeah. So I had one of my welders in welding one. She's going to state now. And then my fab team, they won. So they're going to state as well. So I've got that going on. I've got one of my welders in the booth at AWA welding. And then we're on the way back to the next flight. So my other welder can weld. So so I've got all this going on, and they're excited and everybody's excited. So that was the moment where I was like, yeah, this is where I need to be. It's not, let me say at this point, I don't even know I want to be here, but I'm just going to say this is where I need to be.
Yep, that's exactly right.
This
And
is
I
it.
don't think if anybody's listening, and is thinking about becoming a career tech instructor, let me just tell you this. It's one of those things that I need those kids as much as they need me. There is so much that they've taught me, man. There is so much that there's things that have happened and taken place that have made me a better person all the way around. I'll give you a for instance. I grew up in an environment that we had a lot of love in my house, a lot.
Same, same
But
here.
there was times where we lived in homes where had to heat up our bath water on a wood stove, but I didn't know it because there was a lot of love.
Mhm.
And then I saw my dad work really hard and become really successful. And I saw that change. So for the longest time, I had a no excuses attitude. I've seen it happen. I've seen it. We've gone from dirt floor to, something. And I watched my dad do that through
Mhm.
his own determination, hard work, and drive. So I had a no excuses attitude. But there's nothing like asking a student repeatedly to get their head off the table or off the desk while you're lecturing. And then I walk up and I pat their back and their back's soaking wet. And I say, hey, man, let's go out in the hall real quick. And we get out there and I'm like, what's your back wet from? Why is your back wet? He's like, I try not to get emotional with this, but he's basically saying he went home that night. Mom and dad's overdosed in the living room. Another couple, same in a bedroom next to him, which was his bed. There was nowhere to go. He slept in the garage that had half a roof, and it rained that night. And he came to school in the same gear that he went to bed in. And at that moment, man, I was like, you know what?
Mm.
Yes, I still believe that no matter your circumstances and situations, you can be successful. But man, it really opened my eyes to some of the adversity and trials that these kids are going through.
Absolutely.
And I know that you've experienced the same thing, and that
Yep.
just makes you a better person, man. It's things like that that this profession does for you personally
Yes,
that
absolutely.
nothing else can do for you.
Yep. I remember when I came into this last year, that was a lot of what, the other teachers there and my principal and, they, and for some of the other folks I've met along the way, they all say the same thing, man, this job doesn't pay great, but it pays back in a lot of different ways.
Mhm.
And I've found that to be true. I mean, having the pleasure of sitting here talking to you is a perfect example of that. Had I not taken this, that
Likewise.
we never would have met, man. So this has paid me back in ways that sometimes are, indescribable, and sometimes I just want to keep it to myself.
Yep.
That humbles me or just makes me remember, I guess, who I am, where I came from, what I'm about. Sometimes you veer a little bit and you're just like, man, you working with these kids and talking to these kids and you hear their story and it's like, yeah, life's not that bad, man. Calm down.
Yep. That's exactly
So
right.
it's
Yeah,
very humbling sometimes too. Yeah, absolutely.
definitely is. What's your favorite thing to teach in the lab?
Ooh, I love well, my two I'm a combo guy. I'm a TIG stick guy. Those are my two favorites.
Yeah.
I've ran and it's the funniest part is I've ran a ton of flux core, and I run flux core all day. But it's not like it's not that I dislike it. It's just not. If I had my preference,
It's
I'm a
boring,
TIG
dude.
stick
You
guy.
can just say it. There's
Yeah, it's
nobody gonna
boring.
get
It is.
offended.
It's
Flux core
boring. Sorry,
sucks, and it's
guys. It's
boring.
it's boring. It's important. We need it. Those of you that run it on the reg, I ran it on the reg for a while. I get it.
I did
We
too.
have to have it. You did
Yep.
right. So, but it is boring. It is boring, man. To me, stick and TIG, especially stick. Stick's probably the closest to my heart, to be honest. Some days TIG crawls in there a little bit. It just something. Stick is just an art to me, and I think probably that's what I did the whole time I was in the shipyard. I mean, like I said, I ran some automatics. I ran a lot of flux core there, but the stick, man, was that's where it was at. That was, yeah. That I ran so much of that there, and I just got a passion for it. I just love it. That's what I really like to. I like to teach that, and then of course, we're doing a lot of TIG pipe right now. Like I was saying, we're getting ready for. We're going to try to come to AWA for that best in the Midwest. We're working on that. We're going to try to get out there and kick some butt. So we're running a bunch of 2-inch monsters right now and 6-inch. So we're getting
You're
ready for
coming
that.
for
So
them.
we're coming, man. We're coming for them. So
All right.
I'm having a lot of fun with that right now. So, but yeah, stick
Awesome.
in the shop, my favorite. Yeah.
Awesome. So when you're not teaching, what's Mr. J doing? What are the hobbies?
Working around this place.
Yeah, I'll bet
That's
now.
my
There's a lot to
newest
do, isn't there?
biggest hobby. Yeah, so I've got so we moved in, officially, like, completely moved in. Most of the work was all done.
You enjoy working around the house, getting that stuff, getting your new farm put
Yeah,
together, all that
yeah,
good
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. So we just got moved in right at the end of December. Like, I actually
Yeah.
moved in, and I still have a lot of work to do in here. So I've
Okay.
got my wood shop I got to get together. So I've got a 1,500 square foot shop. So I'm gonna do kind of a split wood shop, welding shop, and then I'm actually thinking about putting a couple booths back there, maybe doing some private stuff.
Mm,
See how that goes, and maybe like there's some home there's a from what I understand up the area we are, there's a lot of homeschool up around here. So I was going to talk to them and see if, try to give them the opportunity to get, kids in the trade that they may not have, because they're not, in a regular school system. So that's something we've been kicking around. But yeah, getting to get the shop together, and I got a bunch of work to do in here. And we're talking about, I'm going to bring in some goats. I'm going to run some goats to clear the land. And
yeah,
we're talking about cattle. We're talking chickens, greenhouse garden, the whole deal. So
man.
just a lot to do, man. Lots to do. Yeah,
That's what that teacher life's gonna do for you.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly right. Give you time to do that stuff, man. Good for
Exactly.
you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah. Thanks.
So, Mr. J, we're gonna wrap this up real quick because I
Sure.
respect your time, and I again, man, I greatly appreciate you being on here
Yes, sir.
today.
It's been a blast. This has been
Th-
great.
You're not kidding. We're gonna do this again. Don't you
Yes.
think for a second,
Oh,
I'm gonna let you off the hook, brother. You're gonna do
well,
this again.
you've
I've had a
jogged my
blast talking to you.
you've jogged my memory on a lot of stuff. There's some stuff I hadn't thought about, talked about, remembered in years, and,
Yeah,
and trying to go through some of that was like, oh yeah, yeah, man. Because I've done
yeah,
boiler making, I've done I mean, I've been through it all: sheet metal, pipe fitting. Gosh, I mean, I guess what I have shipyards. I mean, what haven't I done? I've done a little bit of aerospace stuff. Probably nothing like what you've done, I'm sure, but just a little here and there stuff. But yeah, man, it's yeah, yeah. So know a little bit of everything, and it's been a blast. So
that's
yeah, we
awesome.
can.
We're
I'll
definitely gonna get
remember.
together
I'll
and do
remember
this again.
more. And oh yeah, I would love to. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, give me one piece of advice that you would throw out there to my students, your students, anybody else's students listening to this, and that could be anything related to welding. What's that one piece of advice that you give to a youngster contemplating pursuing trades and especially welding?
I would say, well, in general, I heard this not long ago. I don't remember who said it now. Um, but they said follow, and this may sound counterintuitive, but they said follow your talent, not necessarily your passion.
Mm,
And I think if your talent intersects with your passion, as in my case, and I believe in your case, I think that's an awesome thing. Um, but sometimes I think people might misconstrue or kind of conflate their passion and their talent, and their passion outweighs their talent sometimes. I think so. One of the big things in general is be realistic with yourself about what you can do, and what your opportunities may be. Now, again, I think a lot of times we point to the outliers in the world and say, "Oh, well, this person, they made it. They they didn't have this or have that, or but they made it. They did well. Yeah, that's 1 in 7.8 billion people,
Right.
or a handful. So I think we have to be one in general realistic about our expectations for ourselves. And again, that doesn't mean don't dream high and aim high, but be realistic when you do that. And a couple things my mom always used to say was, there's a dream and a goal are two different things. A dream if you want to compare it to football, she used to say a dream is like the touchdown, where the goal is I'm making it from touchdown to touchdown, that
Yeah.
sort of. So don't necessarily, you don't have to shoot for the moon right away. I think a lot of times, for welders, a little bit of advice for welders: don't be afraid to, and I think maybe Mike said this or you said this, someone recently said this, follow the training, follow the knowledge, don't follow the money. And I think
Yeah.
that was an excellent piece. That's another excellent piece of advice. I probably never necessarily said it in those words, but I used to say, don't chase the money is what I would always say.
Yeah, I
Uh,
tell my students, man, to chase the experience and the money's gonna fall in your lap. Don't chase
it,
the dollars. If
right,
you chase the
right.
experience, it's gonna take care of everything for you.
Ch-
That's exactly right.
Follow, go to places and learn as much as you can. And it's funny. Sean Floatman, if you guys know Sean Dabs Wellington,
Mhm.
on Instagram, he's the student hustler, and I'm teasing him. He's the student hustler out there at AWA. But um, he put it a really good way one time. Oh gosh, now I can't remember what he said. He put that a really good way. Um, Talking about, he says it when he talks about his story. He talks about how he went for, he said I would go to this place and I would learn as much as I could, and once I basically learned everything that was there, uh, it was time to move on to another place and learn more. It was, hey, you gonna pay me more? Nope. Okay, on to the next place. Learn everything you can there,
Yep,
and then level up. But make sure you're being smart, like you said, the experience and the knowledge. Follow that. Just because the guy down the street offers you a quarter or 50 cents or even a dollar,
bingo.
don't lose those connections that you have with that place that you're working at now, because the more time that you put in with them, typically that pays dividends. They're going to give you more money, in the long run. Now if you get in that situation and they made some promises to you, and that's happened to me before, I'm sure it's happened to you, where you go somewhere and they promise you the moon. Oh, you take this test and we'll give you this money, and you pass this test and we'll give you this money, we'll do that. And then the next thing you know, they're not doing that. So if they're not living up to the end of their, the bargain that you made with them, that this maybe time to look for some other place. But learn as much as you can at these places. And if you like the job and you're happy where you are, give it some time. Again, don't chase that dollar. But yeah, if you're talented, and I think talent for welding comes in many different ways. It's not even necessarily just being coming in and being naturally talented as a welder. It's being able to have the ability to learn more, understand more about welding. And I think really being interested in welding is an important thing too, and not just the image of it, but really getting into the nuts and bolts of it, the metallurgy and some of the history. I think the history of welding is important too. I think there's a lot of things out there that we should know. Weld.com is a great video he put out. I was watching it actually earlier. It's 30, I think it's 32 things you should know as a welder. I thought that was an excellent video, and all 32 of
Yeah,
those things that he mentioned were fantastic. So, again, just learn, keep learning. I tell my students, the more you burn, the more you learn, the more you learn, the more you earn. And I mean, that's a fact. You can't know too much about anything that you do. If that's going to be your profession and that's going to be a career and not just a job. And I always differentiate those two. I explain to my students that a career is something that will carry you through your entire life and continue to pay you after you have retired and gone on. A job is something that you just go out and get because you need some money at the moment.
yep.
So, if you're going to make this your profession and this your career, know as much as you can know about it. Take your time, study, read, watch videos. Most of my best welders are just immersed in this. One of my girls, again, I always say she's my top welder in the program. She's constantly coming to me, hey, Mr. J, I'm watching this video and that video, and I got questions about it. Why are they doing it this way? Why are they doing it that way? It looks different or whatever. And it has paid off again in dividends for her. So you immerse yourself in this. If this is what's going to carry you, it's going to feed you and possibly feed your family. So this is something that you should know as much as you can know about it.
That's exactly right. Dive in head first, immerse yourself in this. Learn
Mhm.
to separate the stuff that you see on social media that's just the flash and the flare,
Yeah.
and really understand what you're pursuing. I think that's a huge thing, right?
Yeah.
Is
Absolutely.
understanding what you're pursuing, understanding that, it's not, you're not just always going to be in some nice, comfy place stacking dimes all day. You're going to be
Right.
living out of hotels. Sometimes
Yep.
you might be in a situation where you're going to miss your baby's first birthday.
Mhm.
It's not all glitz and glam like you see on Instagram.
Right. And
That's
I
a
tell you
big
what,
part of it.
there's a lot of guys out there. Gosh, I'm trying to think. So a lot of these guys I'm new to. So if I miss your name, I'm sorry. But I'm just learning as a swing. But Michael Wren, I think he's does a lot of great stuff. He's a Boilermaker, and one of the things I appreciate about his stuff is man, he's showing it like it is, the down and dirty. The heights, the nasty stuff you're laying in, this nasty stuff you're cutting and taking apart, and I mean, he's not afraid to show the nuts and bolts of it, and I think that's important. I think that
Yeah,
gets overlooked a lot because a lot of kids again are seeing again the slick, cup walking and all that good stuff on there. They're not showing you the mirror freehanding in a
right.
on a boiler wall on a boiler rack that you're squeezed in that you can't see the back of. That you're
Yep.
hanging flashlights upside down. That was another thing in the shipyard we did was mostly confined space. I was in confined space out of a year, we were in confined space probably a good 9 months.
Oh,
Crawling
not
these,
me, dude.
yeah, crawling these
Mm-mm.
barges like top to bottom, inside and out, and inspecting and checking and repairing. And so, I mean, there was times I was squeezed into, I don't know, 18 by 18, 24 by 24. I was a little bit smaller then,
Nope. Nope.
but
That
yeah,
wouldn't be me.
and I'd squeeze up in there and art gouge. Now
Mm,
you talk about a party. That's a
you're
party and a
not
half
kidding.
because even if you're blowing it away from you, there would be a rib down the center that would hold these bulkhead structures together, and it would bounce off of that and come back and get you. So that's where the finesse came in. And like Mike was saying when you guys were talking about it, there's something about being able to get that clean and do it where it's clean. And if you can do that, yeah, you're a champ with gouging, man.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, why don't we tell
Mhm.
everybody how to find you on social media, John? Let's
I
give
have
them your
just a
handles.
I just have an Instagram, and it's of course at Mr.J Welds with a Z. So that's MrJWeldz. Mr. J Welds. I'm not really big on any of the other stuff. I've got a personal Facebook. It's mostly all the welding stuff, but that's typically more for my students and whatnot.
Sure.
But yeah, that's it. So that's just my IG. Kids are trying to talk me into TikTok, but I don't know if I want to get into all that. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, I look forward to seeing you on there. Your kids will talk you into it. I promise you that.
Oh
That's for
man,
sure.
I know that.
You'll be
I know they
there.
will.
You'll be there, brother. Yes, sir. I'll tag you in this in all the videos that I post
Awesome.
as well with this. So you'll
Awesome.
definitely get tagged in everything that I produce from this interview.
Cool. Good deal,
Uh,
Josh.
John, listen, man. From an instructor that's been doing this a while, I want to thank you, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart for what you
Thank,
do. Your students need you. Your district is extremely lucky to have you.
thank you.
I would be, if I were an administrator, I would be proud to have you as my instructor.
Thank you, sir.
Your kids are if they don't know it now, they're definitely going to look back and know how lucky they were to have Mr. J in their lives. So again, thank you for everything that you do, John. And again, I appreciate your time here and joining me on the Speaking of Skilled Trades podcast. And I hope we can do this again in the near future and catch up. Maybe we can
Absolutely.
get together during the summer, dude, and
Yeah, oh yeah.
do some video work together.
Let's do it, man. Absolutely.
I'm totally down, and
I'm
you're not
game,
that
man.
far
I'm
away
game.
from me.
No, we're not. Not far. A couple
And,
hours, I think. So yeah, not far at all.
and you got a wife, I got one. I'll bring her. We'll go to Fourth and Live, and we'll hang out,
It sounds good, man.
dude. Let's do it.
All right.
Mr. John Jenkins, thanks again for joining me on the Speaking of Skill Trades podcast. And again, man, have a great rest of the night. And I really appreciate your time and keep doing what you're doing, brother. Thank you
Thanks,
very
Josh.
much.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Take care.